Hello and welcome to this primary election debate for Republican candidates for Arizona's Corporation Commission. This debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Steve Goldstein and I'll be moderating today's debate. This year, 2 of the 5 seats on the Arizona Corporation Commission are up for election. The commissioner is responsible for the regulation of utilities in our state, as well as incorporating Arizona businesses. We're sharing this debate as part of an effort to support democracy in Arizona through a partnership with the Citizens Clean Elections Commission, the Arizona Media Association, and Reister. It's a partnership designed to make these debates accessible to everyone in Arizona. That means this debate and dozens more between now and November will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. It's a shared effort between hundreds of local media brands across Arizona. The format of this debate may be familiar to you, and we've tried to keep the rules simple. Each candidate will have up to 1 minute to make an opening statement, and the same for a closing statement. Candidates have drawn straws to determine the order of each of those portions of this debate. Throughout the debate, we'll pose questions to each candidate, allow them to answer, then make sure the other candidate has a chance to respond. Whenever a question is directed to a specific candidate, only that candidate's microphone will be open. At all other times, every microphone will be open. Thank you to voters across Arizona who've submitted questions for this debate. We've reviewed all of them to make sure every voice is heard. However, no candidates have been given advanced access to any of the questions. And with that, let's introduce the Republican primary candidates for this debate, Kevin Thompson and Nick Myers. The third candidate in the race, Ralph Heap, declined an invitation to participate in this debate. Mr. Thompson, you have the first opening statement. You have 1 minute, sir.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, Arizona. My name is Kevin Thompson. I'm your current Arizona Corporation Commissioner, immediate past chair. Thank you for electing us in 2022, allowing us to serve you for the last 3.5 years. I spent most of my adult life in public service, serving 8 years as an Air Force combat veteran, another 8 years on the City Council in Mesa, and now almost 4 years at the Arizona Corporation Commission. As a commissioner, we have worked tirelessly for you, for Arizonans, to ensure that we're keeping our utilities in check, holding them responsible, putting them in their lane to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is generating electricity and delivering it to our consumers in a safe and affordable manner. I look forward to tonight's questions and tonight's debate, and thank you again for allowing me to be here.
Thank you. And Nick Myers, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Yes, thank you. And I will echo the sentiments of thank you for electing us in 2022. I am Nick Myers. I am the current chairman of the Arizona Corporation Commission. And my background, as many already know, is software engineering. But I came to the Corporation Commission by doing battle with a water utility. There was about a 6 or 7 year fight that ended up very successful. And long story short, here I am today. So as Commissioner Thompson has said, we have focused largely on keeping the utilities responsible and making sure that we focus on reliability and affordability of utilities. And I think we've done a very good job of that over the last 3 years, and we continue to do that to this day, and we hope to get 4 more years out of this.
Mr. Myers, thanks. Gentlemen, let's get to the questions now. And Mr. Thompson, let me start with you. One aspect of the Corporation Commission probably gets the most attention has to do with rate requests from utilities. Before we get into any specifics, can you give us an idea of how you approach that, how you balance out the needs of consumers with the needs of utilities, and what's the process for you?
Yeah, every rate case is different, obviously. It's a very heavily litigated case, each rate case. For us, by the time it comes to us, we have a tough decision to make, and it's one where we have our ALJs have presented a recommended order. It's one where our staff has came back with what they perceive as a just and reasonable return on equity. And then we have the consumer advocate that also has a say. And our job is to look at all the information provided, look at what's been litigated, and try to make sure that what we're doing is good for the utility, but also good for the consumer. Because at the end of the day, it's about protecting the consumers from monopoly utilities. And so we want to make sure that we're identifying wasteful spending, that we're eliminating that from the rates, and not passing that cost onto the consumers. It's a tough economy. I don't think nationally, I don't think we've recovered from the pandemic, and it's still taking its toll. But constitutionally, our utilities are allowed to recover their cost to provide service, and so our job is to make sure that what the utility is presenting is just and reasonable, and that it's and that we are providing a fair return on their equity, on their investment, the capital that they've borrowed to put plant in the ground.
Okay. Mr. Myers, what about the process for you? When you see a rate request, how do you approach it?
Yeah, as Commissioner Thompson said, we have to find that balance, something that keeps the utilities reliable, something that keeps the rates as low as possible. We in Arizona don't typically have too many blackouts and brownouts, and that's because we do things very well here in Arizona. As he said, this is a very highly litigated subject. So when we go through a rate case process, it's about an 18-month, 12 to 18-month process. It very much is like a normal court case where you have defendants, which are the utility, and you have plaintiffs, which are the residential utility consumers office. You've got our staff, you've got stakeholders, all of these people. You can intervene as an individual if you want, and all of these people get together and they get to cross-examine each other, go through discovery, all of that fun stuff you do in a court case, and then the judge goes off and balances all of that data that they've received, and that's when the judge then comes back a little bit later with a recommended order, and it's our job as regulators to basically set the policy for how that's done. We might take a hatchet or a scalpel to that rate case as needed. But fundamentally, our job is policy making. So one of the things that we do is, for example, been a lot of discussion about large loads lately. So the policy that we've been really hammering into our utilities and everybody is that growth should pay for itself. That type of thing is how we keep rates off of residential and small commercial as a whole. So,
okay, yeah. Mr. Thompson. So this week there were some protesters, probably not a new thing for you gentlemen to deal with, considering when people see a potential 14% hike in rates, which is very worrisome. You mentioned how the economy may not have recovered since the pandemic. So how can you, as someone who is, you gentlemen are both consumers yourselves, when you hear from the public, how much weight do you put in what the public has to say? Do you gauge it based on their approach, their style, what their personal experience may be?
Steve, absolutely. That's a great question. We are ratepayers just like everyone else. So, we don't want to increase our rates. Our wives yell at us when our rates go up as well. But at the end of the day, we are consumers also. And so, yes, we hear a lot of times, well, you guys weren't at the dais listening to us. Doesn't mean we're not listening. We read every single document that gets filed in the docket. I was on virtually yesterday listening to testimony. We were during the TEP case, Chair Myers and I were both down in Tucson, as was Commissioner Marquez Peterson, listening to the comments, right? And so we listen to people. We weigh what they have to say. We take that into consideration, but we also have to ensure that we're being just and reasonable for the utility as well. And so we do listen, we pay attention, and we try to protect the residential ratepayers across Arizona for all the utilities, not just electric, but water, natural gas, everything. So, if it's a non-municipal utility, we're doing our best to protect them.
Okay. Mr. Myers, what about you when it comes to hearing from, real people in the community?
Yeah, I try to attend as many of those public comment sessions as I possibly can, and we are busy, obviously, with the work that we have to do, so we don't always make it. But all of that is recorded. We can go back and view that. We do take public comment as part of the written docket as well. That is a very solid way to make sure that everybody can see your comments in an easy fashion. And it is a very important part of the process. We hear a lot of the same kind of message. We don't want rate increases and things like that. We totally get that. As was said, we are ratepayers as well. When we go home and have to explain our vote to our wives, we better make darn sure that we are comfortable with that vote. Otherwise, we're going to be sleeping on the couch. So, it's interesting that some of the comments that are brought up that it just flat out don't make a whole lot of sense about we are running clean elections. Obviously, you see it in the background here. But we get accused of things that accepting money from utilities and things of that nature, which, absolutely is 100% false, because we can't legally do that, and it's all disclosed and everything. But those are the types of things we hear about that really maybe aren't as constructive. But every once in a while you get somebody that comes up and says something that you may not have known, and you need to go out and investigate that more. Maybe go talk to the utility. We had one in Tucson that not too long ago, and the lady came up and said something about not being able to do something with her bill. I forget what the exact scenario was, but TEP was actually listening to that, and they followed up with that lady immediately during that public comment session before I even had a chance to get the question out. So that public comment is very good for a number of reasons, but there is a lot of things that come out of that public comment that really aren't as beneficial. But by and large, the process is needed.
But you try to be as open-minded as you can.
100%.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, you see it?
Absolutely. We don't walk in prejudging. We're not allowed to, because we are quasi-judicial in nature. So we have to listen with an open mind and not predetermine. And so we try to take that approach on every single thing that we do. We listen openly. We read every email. We read all the statements in the docket. Our staff reads through everything as well, brings it to our attention in case we miss something. But absolutely, we try as hard as we can to openly look at everything, because as Chairman Meyer said, sometimes somebody may bring something up that you haven't thought about, and that gives us an opportunity to investigate it, look at it, delve into it, talk to our staff about it, and see if it's something that we can work with, or something that really would be impactful for the consumer.
Okay. Mr. Myers, in a similar vein, so reporting this week related to APS's current rate case filing includes a request to change to so-called formula rates, meaning it could increase customer rates without having to get approval from the Corporation Commission every time. This would apply to TEP as well. First of all, I want to ask you, for those watching or listening, what formula rates mean to you with the term, since you guys have knowledge of having done this for a while. But on top of that, is in any way a possibility of that taking away some power from the Corporation Commission, who are duly elected commissioners? Does that concern you at all?
Absolutely not. And I kind of actually object to the phrasing of having the rates increase without oversight, right? Which wasn't the exact word you used, but it was the context there. The reality is it's the exact same formula that's used to set the rates during a rate case. What we're doing is basically saying we're going to reapply that same formula with the same basic structure every year. So there are actually quite a few benefits that come with formula rates. And by the way, that was the rate process restructuring was the very first docket that I opened after I was sworn in. And the reason for that is because we got so many people that were asking us on the campaign trail, hey, why do my bills go up like this every 3 or 4 years? There's a great big steep spike. Can't we just make it match inflation a little better? So that was the goal. And that's exactly the point behind the so-called formula rates, or rate adjustment mechanisms is really what we're starting to call them. And it has the exact same oversight, if not more oversight. We still have to go through a prudency determinations from the commission. We still have to vote on them just like we normally would. But we've also added some other transparency items. Some of those are that the utilities now have to put all that information out online, where utilities or where the customers can actually see that and start questioning it themselves. So there's actually added transparency in this entire process. And then, as I said, it kind of is there to match inflation, which means it has the ability to actually go down. The way the current structure is, utilities do not come in for rate decreases. You never see that. And that's for good reason. Now, as part of the formula rate process, that we're requiring that they come in every single year to readjust that formula, which means that if natural gas prices fall off, inflation takes a dip, whatever the case is, you actually have a chance of having a rate decrease, which is something you've never had before. So there's a lot of benefits to the customers. There are a couple of benefits to the utilities as well, as far as rate recovery, and that's a good thing for the customers, believe it or not, because you're not paying interest on all that money the utilities are holding for years.
Mr. Thompson, before you speak, I want to ask you one quick follow-up, though, because I think there are going to be some people who are watching and are going to take that visual of why does it do this. I think you explained it well, but I think when people think to themselves, well, wait a second, why would it go up every year, which based on what you said, it may not. But so you're saying that this has the potential of, rather than every 3 to 4 years, whatever the request may be, of maybe seeing this huge spike, you're saying this could in fact lead to leveling off or potentially decreases, whereas with a 3 to 4 year increase, there's no chance of that.
I guess I would classify it as one way or another, at some point you're going to get it from here to here. Okay. Do you want it like this, boom, or do you want it gradually with some potential dips in between so that it kind of follows that path? And generally speaking, people like their salaries will follow that inflationary path, 2 or 3% a year, as opposed to 14 or whatever percent happens to be, in 3 to 5 years.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Chairman Myers is correct. We did hear a lot from people, excuse me, that wanted rate gradualism and not those spikes every 3 to 5 years. And and I think formula rates is a way to levelize the rate, so it's gradual in nature. It avoids those spikes. It allows the consumers, to develop their budget a little bit better, knowing what their rates are going to be. It's something that's been used at the federal level for 50 years. Yeah.
More than 50.
Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has used formula rates for 50 years. There's a lot of states across the nation that are using formula rates. There's some that have tried it and failed, but there's a lot more that have been successful than there have been unsuccessful. And so our hope is, we're working through this process now. We're wanting to, figure out, where are the bumps along the way, and let's figure out what those bumps are, and let's smooth them out, and then let's go into rulemaking and codify this in rules as we figure it out. But I think long term, to Commissioner Myers' point, it allows the utilities to recover their cost a lot quicker, which means the consumers aren't paying that pass-through interest rate on the capital that the utilities borrowed. So, it should be a gradualism in the rates and not spikes.
Okay. And if I can use some rebuttal time, if you will, just to add some color, he mentioned that this formula rates have been used at FERC for 50, maybe 60 years. And with one of our utilities, I got some information that 4 of the last 5 years have actually been rate decreases at FERC. So some context there.
Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
That is correct.
FERC, okay.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson, I want to go back to something you said earlier on in your opening statement, and a little bit after the opening statement as well, related to this particular moment in time and how things are much less affordable. There was direct inflation. In some cases, it affected people's energy and utility costs. In some cases, it didn't. Again, I'm sort of delving into the mind of a corporation commissioner. How much does that factor into you to look at what things are now when considering, as you said, trying to fairly balance what the utility needs and what the consumer needs? This is a point where consumers are in even greater need. It's been that way for a couple of years, it seems, and maybe even more so because of what's going on in the Middle East.
Yeah, one of the misconceptions, I guess, for the utility, or from the consumer side, looking at the utilities, the rate cases are developed based off of historic test year. So it's capital that the utilities already spent on poles, wires, pipelines, fuel, labor, tools, vehicles, software, computers. It's everything that it takes to run a utility. It's the capital that they borrow. So all the money that they've borrowed that they've already expended, they're now coming in and asking to recover. And again, it's constitutionally, they're allowed to recover the cost to provide service. And so, all of that, when you look at what's happened inflation-wise over the last 5 years, under the Biden administration, we had a 33% inflation. The utilities aren't immune to that. Cost of labor goes up, cost of parts go up. Our supply chain right now is atrocious. Trying to get a generator or a transformer is, 3 to 10 years out, just trying to get a transformer. And so all of that has an impact on the cost. And so what we try to do is look at it and say, what is just and reasonable? We certainly want to make sure that the utilities aren't gold plating. That's not in the best interest of the consumer. So we're wanting to make sure at the same time that the utilities aren't trying to compete with a free market. There's companies out there that install EV chargers. Our utilities should not be installing EV chargers, right? They don't need to be competing. Their job is to generate power and provide it to the consumer. And that's what we're holding them to. And we're trying to do it in the most effective and affordable way that we can.
Mr. Myers, to you, sort of in the same vein, and maybe if you want to branch out a little bit on it, but I'm really curious about, because of, we talk about these rate cases, the work that commissioners do and how long it takes, but in this moment in time, and Mr. Thompson made the point about inflation in the Biden administration, but now, of course, it's specifically being affected, fuel prices, oil prices, and that one would think that could affect energy prices in the home pretty soon. Is that something that, at least in the short term, a commissioner can afford to look at?
So the answer is we are always taking those into consideration. I will note kind of a continuation of what Commissioner Thompson was saying, is that the prices that the utility customers are paying are generally 3 to 4 years old before they even hit the bills. And that's partly because that process takes a year and a half. It's based on a test year that was a year prior to that. And then, of course, they spent the money prior to that. So it can be a fairly long time before you actually see these things actually affect bills. Another misconception about, what we do, we can't actually say no to a rate case. It's not a thing that we can do. The best we can do is make amendments to make it as good as we can, but we have to allow, by Constitution, a fair and reasonable return on the costs to do business for that utility. I will also note that there were a couple of incidences that happened in prior commissions before we were elected, that where the commission tried to push the can down the road a little bit. Things like the purchased fuel adjusters. And this was because of COVID, it was because of Winter Storm Uri, and I'm not going to judge the actions, I wasn't there, but the reality is, when we got it, there was a big backlog in fuel adjuster costs that we had to deal with at the time. So, and that did not bode well for for us, because we had to deal with it. But it ended up having to be in rates, and it wasn't a gradual thing at that point. So it really affected a lot of people. Luckily, a lot of those companies have paid those off, and that we've actually seen a reduction in the rates. But those kind of things can bankrupt utilities, and they were on the verge of that. Another one was some decisions that were made by the previous commission that they thought they were doing the right thing by lowering ROE and not allowing recovery on some things that were mandated. They went to court and they won. So, of course, we had to deal with that. But that kind of shows you that we don't have the options that a lot of people think we do. We do have to allow them to recover certain costs.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, let's change up to a phrase that people have been hearing a lot about lately, and that's data centers.
Yep.
What's the impact of data centers' use of energy, and how will that affect a commissioner's job going forward? We have a lot of communities in Arizona that have either considered them, rejected them, accepted them. There's been a lot of all of that. So explain to us where data centers will figure into what the commission does.
Absolutely. There's a lot of misconceptions about data centers. We call them, large load users, because they're using the same amount of power as an Intel or the same amount of power as a TSMC. So instead of just cutting out one, type of development, let's talk about all of them together, right? And one of the things that this commission has said since day one, certainly Chairman Myers and I have made very, very clear to the utilities from day one, from sitting on the dais, is growth pays for growth. That we're not going to allow large load user costs to be put on the backs of residential consumers. We're sticking to that. The utilities are doing their part. In fact, anytime we get a line siting agreement that comes through, one of the things that we look at is this for a large load user? And the question I'll ask is the large load user, is the end user paying for this transmission line? The answer better be yes. We've asked that several times, and the answer has been yes. I know Chairman Myers is working right now through our national organization. He's part of the NARUC FERC Joint Task Force, and they're working right now on, and this is not just Arizona, this is nationally. Chairman Myers is representing the West, obviously, but they're working with the federal government to figure out how do you do the same thing with transmission lines, because typically FERC will take those transmission lines, they take the cost and they just send it down to us and say, here's how you allocate the cost. We want to make sure that that cost is allocated properly, and that if it's for the betterment of the grid as a whole, then all the consumers will pay. But if it's for a specific end user, it's that specific end user that's going to pay that cost. We don't want to burden the residential and small business consumers.
Okay. Mr. Myers?
Yeah, this mindset of cost causers are the cost payers is something that we both actually taken all over the country to speak about. Arizona's been doing some variation of it for quite a while, but it's become kind of front and center these days. And it's a very important topic because if you have a huge load come online, it can have some pretty drastic impacts on the transmission lines to get the power there. You may have to build an entire nuclear power plant in some cases to serve that. That doesn't really have a whole lot of benefit to the rest of the ratepayers. So we need to make sure that those costs absolutely are allocated appropriately to the user that needs that power. And he's absolutely right in that sometimes it's difficult to do that. You may not necessarily see where the costs go or where they come from. But what we're seeing in that field is a lot of these large loads are wanting to play nice in the communities. We've been having these discussions with them, and they want to get to power faster. And so what we're saying is, well, okay, how about we offset some of the rates? Let's try to get you to subsidize the residential so that you're putting downward pressure on residential and small commercial. And a lot of them are agreeing to do that. We just had a large load workshop actually, and where we kind of started talking about how can we standardize this approach a little more. And one of the things, the big takeaways that I got from that is everybody in all of the industries think that there needs to be a dual approach. You have a tariff set up so everybody can see the transparency of the pricing and whatnot, but it's a very consistent piece of the puzzle. But since all the large loads are very, very different in the way they affect the grid, you need some flexibility on top, which is where these energy service agreements come in. And we just did that with TEP and Project Blue. We added a bunch of customer protections in an energy service agreement to make sure that all of their costs are going to be paid by them and not by residential. So it's a perfect example.
Mr. Thompson, want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I mean, he's 100% correct, right? Coming out of the large load user workshop, we're looking for, I think developers are looking for some type of assurity, standardization across the industry so that they know when they come to Arizona that they can build. Because we are competing nationally with Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Texas, you name it, Nevada, California still. We're competing for economic development. And the last thing we want is our grid to become unstable and our costs to go up. And so we're keeping an eye on that. We want to promote economic development. We want companies to come here and build here because we want our citizens to be employed. So we're part of that economic development machine. We're just playing a small part, which is the water and the electricity and natural gas. And so we want to make sure, we have a reliable grid. And by the way, we have the 7th most reliable grid in the nation, and we're one of the most affordable in the nation. And so, no natural disasters here, but it does get hot. And so we have to make sure that we have enough power to keep people's air conditioning and keep their lights on during the summer when it's 120 degrees.
Can I make a quick follow-up? Sure. So you have confidence when you deal with APS and TEP in particular that regardless of whether our temperatures are getting hotter, that they have taken steps to do their best, at least, nothing is 100%, to do their best to make sure we don't have blackouts and brownouts? Steve,
last year we set 3 days in a row of record peak demand. In August of last year, APS, TEP, and SRP, all three hit record demand. Not a single light flickered. Nobody in the state even realized it until the media brought it up on the news, that 3 back-to-back days of record peak demand. It was hot. It was 115, 120 degrees. Air conditioners run 24/7, when it's that warm, and not a flicker in our light. And I think that's a testament not only to the utilities, but the men and women at the utilities are working hard every single day to make sure the lights stay on. And I think it's a testament to our staff that are ensuring that the utilities are doing their job of generating power and delivering it to the consumer.
Mr. Myers, you can follow up on the previous answer.
Yeah, a little bit outdated now, but I wanted to touch on the topic of water because there's a lot of discussion, especially with data centers, around water use. And while those concerns are very valid for traditional data centers, they do tend to use a lot of water. The utilities or the customers are starting to get the message that you can't do that in the desert. We don't have that kind of water anymore. So what they're doing is by and large, those large utility customers are doing things like treating wastewater to their own standards, or even more beneficial is they're actually recycling the water and putting it in a closed loop system. So those data centers they may use more air conditioning to cool that water, which is more electricity, but by and large, they're not using the amounts of water that they used to use. So we're getting the message across to these large load customers that water in Arizona is precious and water is for fighting, whiskey's for drinking. We've said that, forever, and it applies in this case too. So we're getting that message across.
So very brief follow-up on that, because when Project Blue was going through the machinations there, they came up with a phrase called water positive.
Yes.
And no one really thought that was a thing. Are you saying that treated wastewater, are you saying that this loop is somewhat in that realm of water positivity?
It's a little bit different. So the water positive nomenclature that people are starting to use now, I guess, is really kind of what I said about treating the water. So they'll take effluent that maybe isn't treated to drinkable standards or whatever. They'll treat it themselves on site, use the water before they put it back in the ground. So there's and what that means is they're water positive in the sense that they're actually creating cleaner water than what they take in.
Mr. Thompson, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great for the environment. I think all of the large load users come in, they want a clean environment. Nobody wants to breathe, bad air or drink bad water. And so I think they're all willing to do their part. I know when I was a council member in Mesa, Meta came in, and one of our concerns was the water use. And, we told them we weren't going to give them our 100-year supply of water. So they went out and acquired water credits. They turned those water credits over to us, so it didn't count against our 100-year supply. We willed the water for them. Basically, they took Mesa water, and then we got their water credits, and then we either, once they used the water 4 or 5 times, they ran it through the coolers and went back into our system, and we would treat it, and we would either put it back into the aquifer, or we put it in the river to let it percolate, or we would trade with the Gila River Indian community for the effluent that they use on cotton fields. And then we would get their water credits. And so if we did direct inject back into the aquifer, we got water credits for that. Or if we sent it to the GRIC, we got their allocation of CAP water. So that truly was a water positive for the city of Mesa. And so, it was kudos to the water attorneys at the city. They did a phenomenal job of negotiating that, and it held our citizens of Mesa harmless in the water use.
Mr. Myers, one more data center related question. Are you optimistic going forward that as we see more developers wanting to, or more businesses wanting to come to Arizona to build data centers, that there is a learning curve that isn't quite as steep, that there are best practices coming? Or is this one of these things that consumers are going to have to continue to worry about, and corporation commissioners are going to continue to have to talk to these businesses and say, wait a second now, remember, this is the desert, and we had this deal about water?
No, I think you're starting to see some. Well, let me start with Arizona is not new to data centers. We've got dozens and dozens and dozens of them over the years. What's different is the scale at which these large loads are coming in at. It used to be a 30 megawatt data center is the pretty standard. Now they're coming in at 300 megawatts for the first phase, and this is a problem that's all across the country. So a lot of these policies that are currently being developed around data centers is something that hopefully will be more, I guess, standardized or at least consistent across the nation, not just Arizona. But you're definitely going to see it in Arizona, and we're going to do our best to make sure that they are standardized. But a lot of these data centers, they don't want to have multiple different variations. If you're going to go closed loop in one, you might as well go closed loop in two, right? So standardization is good for everybody, and I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of trouble with that going forward. I think really what the problem is now is just messaging and making sure that people understand that these data centers are going to ultimately be a benefit to your neighborhood as opposed to a hindrance for the most part.
Mr. Thompson, let's change topics. I want to ask both of you, obviously you're current commissioners, why did you decide to repeal the renewable energy standard that the commission had set up in 2006?
Yeah, that was one of the things on my list of things to do when we were campaigning. The renewable energy standards and tariffs were outdated rules. Those were rules that were developed 20 years ago. All of our utilities had already met the intent, and so there were part of those rules required all the utilities annually to file a letter that basically said we've met the intent of the REST rules. Why put that onus on the utilities if they've already met it? You know, we're wasting attorney time, we're wasting ratepayer dollars, and we're wasting our staff's time reading a document that an attorney charged, you know, $500 or $1,000 that goes into rates to simply say we've met the intent of the REST rules. And so we looked at those and said it's time for them to go. You know, coupled with the energy efficiency and DSM mandates that were placed on the utilities between REST and DSM and energy efficiency, it cost ratepayers over almost $4 billion since those were implemented. And so it was time to get rid of those, and let's really get back to focusing on what's best for the consumer and how can we lower the consumer's bills. And so that's really what we did. We you know, one of the things I think we also took away from when we dove into the REST rules was the astronomical cost that it was costing for the big solar field that was out in, what was the name of that field? Solana plant, right? And that's a 30-year contract that APS is locked into. And we're only 10, 15 years into it, so we still have another 15 to 20 years. And that's costing consumers 30 cents per kilowatt hour when they can generate that exact same amount of power right now for between 9 and 12 cents. And so it's just showing you how bad policy is really impacting, bad policy from the past is really impacting our consumers today.
Mr. Myers, I obviously want to have you answer that, so please do. And as a quick follow-up to both of you, but first, Mr. Myers, how much of Arizona's energy portfolio should be renewable? There are people who say, well, it's sunny, it seems like 365 days of the year. Not quite, but almost there. Where do you want renewables to fit in overall? Where do you think it should fit in?
Sure. You know, first to the REST rule repeal, I would just echo everything he just said, especially that part about Solana. That was something that we dealt with as a policy advisor before I was a commissioner. I was dealing with that, and it chapped me to no end that the users were now stuck with a contract paying multiples of the current value of that electricity. And, you know, were those REST rules right for the time? I don't know, maybe. I'm not a big fan of mandating utilities to do things. The problem with mandating is you're essentially giving the utility a blank check. And when Solana is a perfect example. If you make them invest appropriately and then come justify it, then you have a tool in your toolbox to manage that. To your question about renewables and what's the right mix, I don't know that I have necessarily an answer for that because it's all situational. There are times when renewables absolutely can save money on the grid. There's a specific case out by Saddlebrook where it saved restringing transmission lines because they were able to put solar plus battery in for some peak time demand. That's not always the case, and usually the planning and zoning at the local level is where those projects are approved or denied. We actually don't have any regulatory authority over renewables. It's just not in the statutes that allow us to do that at this point in time. We only have thermal generation control. So to say that there needs to be that specific number, I can't do that and I won't do that, but I do think that an above all approach is really the way to go. We need that mixture because that's how you keep costs down.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, to what extent? Yes.
Sure. You know, I'm like Chair Myers. I'm not going to give a number because I don't know what that number is. I can tell you that the all of the above approach for us is, you know, we're not going to pick winners and losers. We force, you know, we have all source RFPs for generation, so we want to make sure that every type of generation competes so that the consumers are getting the lowest cost. I'll tell you though, we had a natural gas workshop in August of last year, and we had this big dust storm that blew through the valley. And it was the day before. So this was on a Monday because our workshop was on a Tuesday. I asked the utilities when they got there, be prepared later in the day. I'm going to ask you the question, how did yesterday's dust storm impact your solar and to what extent? When it didn't impact TEP because the dust storm started really in Casa Grande and worked its way up to the valley. The bad part was APS lost about 1,000 megawatts and SRP lost about 600 megawatts combined. So 1,600 megawatts, basically a Palo Verde, is what was lost on the grid over during the exact same time that we were entering our peak demand of the evening. So we were adding another 300 megawatts of demand onto the grid at the same time that the solar went off. The only thing that saved our grid was the utilities went to backup natural gas peaker plants, fired those up, and recovered the grid. So you could imagine if you had 50% of your grid was reliant upon solar, you just had rolling blackouts or just straight up blackouts across the entire state of Arizona.
Okay. Mr. Myers, I want to stick with REST for one question, and that is related to a column you wrote for the Arizona Capital Times regarding Attorney General Mays, who was obviously chair of the Corporation Commission for a time, and she was on the commission when REST was put into effect. So to quote from your column, the Attorney General has taken aggressive positions in Arizona public service and Tucson electric power matters more broadly, intervening in ways that go beyond traditional legal participation and into sustained public opposition to commission proceedings. I'll jump ahead. The Attorney General has demonstrated a willingness to escalate nearly every major commission decision into a legal or public dispute. So I'll ask you, first of all, is this Republican versus Democrat, or is it deeper than that?
I think, if I'm being completely candid, that it's political season. It's election season. She is, in my opinion, she is using this platform as a way for her to get her name in the press more often. These lawsuits that she keeps filing really have virtually no merit, as best that I can tell at this point in time. But that's Nick Myers' position, not necessarily that of the entire commission, but I just don't feel like her lawsuits have I think there's nefarious reasons for filing those lawsuits, and it's because we can be used as a punching bag and won't necessarily punch back, and so we're an easy target for her to get her name in the press.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, any thoughts?
I agree. I don't think there's merit behind a lot of the things that she accuses us of. There are certain aspects or certain lawsuits that she's filed that she accuses us of that she did when she was in office. And so it's kind of, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So you're going to, try to sue us for something that you did when you were a commissioner. And so I think a lot of this is just frivolous lawsuits. And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, it's the citizens of Arizona that are paying, for her to run her campaign through lawsuits across the state of Arizona.
Okay. Mr. Myers, let's move on to sort of a philosophical definition. How would you define energy independence for Arizona? And do you think we're there or almost there?
I think the easy definition is we need to make sure that we have enough energy to cover our load in Arizona. We are currently a stabilizing force in the West. When California's bad energy policies catch up with them, we generally are there to help bail them out, and we sell them energy, at an not an inflated cost, but at a higher rate because it's in demand, right? Supply and demand, and we have that extra energy to pay, or for them to pay for that, and we use that to offset our rates. So I think that's my definition, is to make sure that we are self-sufficient and actually are a balancing force within the entire West. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have all of the resources to do that ourselves. We do not have natural gas in Arizona, so we have to pipe that in from Texas and New Mexico. And that is unfortunately not very energy independent if you take a broader view of it. But that also means that we have renewables. We got a ton of those out here, but we got to use that natural gas to balance them. We are a very nuclear friendly state. We might see more nuclear coming up. But I think fundamentally it's that we want to make sure that our Arizona citizens do not have blackouts and brownouts to the best, and to the best that we can do. We're going to support other states as opposed to having to rely on other states.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, energy independence.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, that the fact that we can keep our lights on, during our summers. One of the things that Chairman Myers and I both have been working on since we've been on the commission is markets. Nick, Chairman Myers, has worked on the market, what they call Markets Plus, and that's really looking at power that's available in the Midwest. I've been working on the other side of the coast. Unfortunately, I got stuck with the West Coast.
I won.
And so what we're calling EDAM, it's the early day ahead market. And with EDAM, the intent is that we sort of send power back and forth. So during the summer, we want access to that cheap hydropower coming out of Oregon and Washington State, and in return during the winter, when it's really cold up there, we'll send them our excess, because it's 60 degrees here, and we're wearing shorts and flip-flops. So while they're bundled up in parkas, we'll send them power and help them. And so we've been looking at which market we're going to go to, and so it's a that's part of being energy independent, is your ability to not only have the resource adequacy that keeps your lights on, but then how can you work with other states to bring in cheaper power? Right now, we are what they call negative pricing during the day on power, because we're being paid by California utilities to take their excess power, because they're generating so much power during the day from solar that they're paying our utilities, Nevada Energy and Washington State and Oregon. They're paying the utilities to take their excess power so it doesn't crash their grid. And so at night, as Chairman Meyer said, at night when they need the power, we turn around and sell it back to them. So if you're a California resident, sucks to be you, because you're getting hit twice, right? Not only are you paying for that extra power, but you're also paying what the utility paid us to take. If you're our consumers, you love it because it helps reduce our costs.
Okay. Not a phrase I expected to hear. It sucks to be you in a corporation commission today. Gentlemen, the current legislative session includes some bills that, if passed and signed, could affect the work of the Corporation Commission. The only one I'm going to bring up is HB 2331, which has been summarized this way. It would amend current statutes by adding new requirements for electric public service corporations and public power entities regarding their generating capacity. Specifically, starting January 1st of 2030, these entities must ensure that at least 85% of the generating capacity relied upon consists of quote-unquote reliable resources. Not really sure how reliable is defined, but Mr. Myers, what do you make of that? Is this something you're concerned about as a commissioner?
I don't think that bill passed. It was never signed by the governor.
No, it hasn't been signed for sure. Yes.
Honestly, I think it's a bit of an overreach. The legislature, they are not full of energy wonks, right? To put it bluntly, they are there to make laws. If they want to make that law, we will follow it, but that's how you get in trouble. That's how California gets in trouble. You need to let the experts handle the energy mix. Do I agree with that? Not necessarily. I think 100% of our energy should be reliable. But reliable can be defined in many different ways. As a matter of fact, when we're talking about the markets that Chairman or the Commissioner Thompson was talking about, reliability and benefits can be defined so many different ways that it's actually difficult sometimes to agree on how they should be defined. So to say that we 85% of our electricity should be reliable, I have to assume that means that they don't like solar and wind. And that's a fair stance, but I think doing that in law is not the right place to do it. I think it needs to be done at the Corporation Commission level, where we have access to the resources needed to make those judgment calls. And that doesn't mean that I'm a raving fan of renewables by any stretch of the imagination, but again, the right energy for the right application is how you stay reliable.
1 minute, Mr. Thompson, on that?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we did, Chair Myers and I did a joint amendment during the IRP when APS was talking about, at the time, the closure of Four Corners. And we said if in the future Four Corners closes, you have to replace the megawatts lost with reliable, dispatchable power. And so where the nuances are is in dispatchable. Because you want to be able to dispatch that power in the evening when the sun's not shining or the wind's not blowing. And so we want dispatchable power. Reliability, I think, is open for interpretation by, you could put 20 people in the room and you're going to come up with 20 different opinions on what is the standard for reliability. But dispatchable is something that's easily defined. And to Commissioner or Chairman Meyer's point, I think, we have the resources available to really get into the energy mix and what that should look like and how it should interact in the grid. And so leave it to us and our staff, but we'll work with you. If our doors are always open. If you want to talk to us, call us. We'll come down and talk to you. We'll meet with you and help you form a bill that's that I think everybody can agree with.
We'll have to be quick on this one. Mr. Myers, I'll give you a minute for it, and I may have to cut you off if you go any longer than that. Observers have described the Corporation Commission as the most important government panel in Arizona no one understands or even talks about. Since you've served, what do you make of that?
Well, we're definitely the Rodney Dangerfield of offices. We get no respect. But I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that means we're doing our job right. The more attention we get, the worse things are up here. And people just want to go home and turn on their light switch, and they want their power to come on. They want to turn on their faucet, and they want that water to run out. And that's exactly what we're here to do. We're here to make sure that that reliability is there, that it's done at the least costly method, the most affordable method that we can possibly get. And that's our job. That it gets very technical at times, and that's why people don't necessarily look at us. That's not a bad thing. Somebody's got to do it, but that's why we're here.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, one of the things that we often say is we have rulemaking authority that even the President of the United States can't overturn. And so it's very important that you have people that understand what this, with all the issues that we're having nationwide with our electric grid, aging electric grid, and the demand, the issues that we're going to be having with the Colorado River. This is a time when you want people with experience in, not people that build slogans, that build bumper slogans, bumper sticker slogans, or use buzzwords. And so, this is a time for grown-ups to be at the table. We have some serious issues, and we need to make sure the right people are in the right jobs. Because again, you set bad policy, it takes a long time to overturn it, and only the commissioners can overturn it.
Mr. Thompson, give me 30 seconds on this one, please. When you started with the commission, you were new to it, though you'd served, obviously, in communities as well. What did you not know about the commission that you learned, whether it was first day or year 3, whatever it is? Quick,
there was a lot. How broken the organization was. You really had individuals in charge that really didn't care about the commission or the employees. You had activists that were running the show. It was literally the inmates were in charge. And when we came in, the adults came home, and it upset a lot of people. But we've gotten the Corporation Commission now where it's on solid ground, and it's a well-oiled machine. It's working great for the citizens of Arizona.
Mr. Myers, I've got 20 seconds for you.
Sure. A lot of what he said, I came from fighting a utility that where we discovered actual corruption, like FBI involvement, court case corruption. There was others at the utility that were, very entrenched. And we decided, or when we came in, to revamp that place and make it the place that it is now.
Okay. Thank you, candidates, very much. Now it's time for our closing statements. And Mr. Myers, each of you have 1 minute. You go first, please.
Sure. We are in a time where we have unprecedented load growth. We have unprecedented generation growth that needs to happen. We've got a nuclear that's coming fast and furious. We've got new natural gas that's coming. This is a very exciting time to be in the energy world. What that also means is this is a time where you need people with the expertise to actually do the job correctly. This is not a time for rookies. We have some rookies running in our race, and they have openly admitted when they said that they were going to run, that they have no idea about the energy world, but they'll learn on the job, and they'll bring a fresh set of eyes. Well, I could say the same thing about orthopedic surgery, and that's probably not going to turn out well. So I think that it's very important that you have the right people in the right place, and this is a good time to have some experience on the dais.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Thompson, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Sure. So Nick and I have been on the Corporation Commission for 3.5 years, almost 4 years. We've stuck to all the promises that we made. We've eliminated Green New Deal. We've eliminated mandates and subsidies. We've cut over $1 billion out of the utilities budgets. We've done what you've asked us to do, and we're asking you to put us in office for another 4 years so we can codify this into rulemaking and continue to work on behalf of you. We don't answer to the governor. We certainly don't answer to the legislature. We don't answer to activist groups. We don't answer to the AG. We answer to the citizens of Arizona, and we're asking for the citizens of Arizona to vote for Kevin and Nick for 4 more years. So thank you, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, gentlemen. This wraps this primary debate with the Republican candidates for Corporation Commission. As a reminder, the Arizona primary election is on July 21st, and early voting starts June 24th. All registered voters can participate in the primary, including independents. Head to azmedia.org to see a list of every local media partner, plus upcoming debates, and where you can find them on TV, radio, and digital platforms. You can also see the full debate schedule, learn more about Clean Elections, and submit questions for future debates by heading to azcleanelections.gov. On behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister, and Sneaky Big Studios, thank you for joining us.